Hi, my name's Rowena. I was 9 months pregnant when my own father called 911 on me over a missing $100. My stepmother smirked, unwed and knocked up, as the cuffs closed on my wrists. I begged him through tears, "Dad, please, think of the baby." But he turned his back. I gave birth in jail, and what happened next left him silent for life. Before we dive in, tell me, what time are you listening right now, and where from? Drop a comment below. I read everyone. The rain hadn't stopped all day, tapping against the old glass windows like a steady drumbeat. I sat curled on the worn couch, my swollen feet propped on a pillow, a notebook balanced on my belly as I scribbled baby names. 9 months pregnant, every little movement felt heavier, slower. Still, I wanted that small spark of hope, thinking of the future instead of the tension that always lingered under this roof. The air smelled faintly of damp leaves drifting in from the yard. The furnace clicked on with a groan, but the warmth never seemed to reach me. I told myself I'd just get through these last weeks quietly. If I kept my head down, maybe things wouldn't explode. Then the front door slammed so hard the glass rattled. My father's heavy boots tracked mud across the rug as he stormed in. His jaw was set, his brows pinched into that look I'd known since childhood, the one that meant trouble was about to land on me, no matter what I said. "Rowena," he barked, holding up his checkbook. "There's $100 missing. You know anything about that?" I blinked up at him, my pencil still in hand. "No, Dad. I haven't touched it." My voice was steady, but my pulse quickened. Before he could answer, Marlene drifted in from the hallway, her perfume cutting through the damp air. She leaned against the doorway with a smirk tugging at her lips. Funny, isn't it? Money disappears the same week she says she needs new baby clothes. What a coincidence. My stomach tightened. That's not true. I wouldn't— "Oh, please," she interrupted, her tone dripping with disdain. "Unwed, 9 months along, and now a thief. Quite the resume." She glanced at my father, widening her eyes just enough to stoke his suspicion. I set the notebook aside and tried to stand, but the weight of my belly slowed me. "Dad, you know me. I wouldn't steal from you. Not ever." He didn't answer right away. He just stared, torn between his daughter's pleas and his wife's poison. The silence was louder than the rain. Marlene folded her arms, tilting her head like she'd already won. "She probably needed it for whatever she doesn't want you to know about. Maybe the father of that child?" Heat rose to my face. My hands instinctively cradled my belly, shielding the little life inside me from her words. "That's enough," I whispered. But my father didn't stop her. His hand moved toward the phone on the wall. "If you didn't take it, the police can sort this out." "Dad, no." My breath caught. I shuffled closer, clutching the edge of the table for balance. "Please, think of the baby. You can't do this." Marlene's smirk only grew. Maybe she should learn there are consequences. Better now than later. I felt tears slide down my cheeks, hot against my cold skin. "I'm your daughter," I begged. "You raised me. Does that mean nothing?" He didn't answer. His jaw tightened as he dialed. Through the rain-streaked windows, I saw movement. Neighbors peeking out from behind curtains, shadows pressing against glass. Word would spread through town before the night was over. The wail of sirens cut through the storm, growing louder until red and blue lights flashed across the walls. My heart pounded so hard it felt like the baby was kicking in fear. The officers stepped inside, their boots leaving puddles on the floor. I couldn't even meet their eyes. All I heard was the metallic snap of handcuffs locking around my wrists. As the cold steel bit into my skin, I looked up at my father, praying for a flicker of mercy. But he turned his back. As the rain drowned out my sobs, I looked up at my father, hoping for mercy, but he turned his back. The officers shifted uncomfortably, their faces caught somewhere between pity and duty. One of them, A younger man with damp hair plastered to his forehead whispered as he helped me into the cruiser. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Your father insisted." The vinyl seat was cold against me, the cuffs biting into my wrists. Every bump in the road sent a jolt through my body, my belly tightening as though the baby could feel the fear with me. I pressed my eyes shut, trying to steady my breathing, but the storm outside only made the ride feel longer. When we arrived at the station, the fluorescent lights stung my eyes. The air smelled of disinfectant and wet wool from the officers' jackets. One of them walked slightly slower, as if trying to shield me from the curious stares of people in the lobby. Still, I caught a glimpse of Marlene through the rain-streaked glass door. She stood outside with a thermos in her hand, sipping like this was some casual outing. She even laughed at something she said to my father, her smile wide and sharp as a blade. Inside, the officer who'd been kind enough to whisper leaned closer. "You shouldn't be here," he muttered, keeping his voice low. "But your father signed the report. Our hands are tied." The words sank into me heavier than the cuffs ever could. "He's all I had left," I whispered back, though my throat ached with the effort. My voice cracked, and the tears I had tried to hold back slipped free. They led me to a small holding cell. The clang of the metal door closing behind me echoed through my chest like a final judgment. I lowered myself onto the narrow bench, wincing as my back protested. My hands instinctively cradled my belly. "We'll be okay," I whispered to the child inside me. "I promise I'll get us through this." From the barred window above, I could see faint outlines, shadows of people moving in the rain. My stepmother's figure was unmistakable. She tilted her head back, taking another slow sip, her posture relaxed, as though she were celebrating. I closed my eyes, but her voice echoed in my mind anyway. Unwed and knocked up. The humiliation burned deeper than the damp chill of the cell. I'd always known she wanted me out of the picture, but never, not in my worst fears, had I thought my father would go this far. A soft knock on the bars pulled me back. The young officer returned, sliding a paper cup of water through the gap. "You can ask for a call if you want," he said gently. My heart leapt with a flicker of hope. "Please, I need to call my sister." But just as I started to rise, I heard the heavy footsteps of my father in the corridor. He stepped up to the desk outside, his voice hard and flat. "She doesn't get a call. She'll only spin lies." The officer hesitated, glancing at me with sympathy, but my father's tone left no room for debate. I sank back onto the bench, the cup trembling in my hands. His words cut deeper than the steel cuffs ever had. Through the bars, I saw Marlene step closer, her voice carrying clearly enough for me to hear. "She won't last long without us." She chuckled softly, her hand brushing my father's arm as though she'd just delivered him a gift. I pressed both hands against my belly, whispering to the child who shifted gently inside me, "Hold on for me. Just hold on." My chest tightened with fear and desperation, but I knew I couldn't let her see me break. Not yet. I closed my eyes, praying the night would pass quickly, but the storm was only just beginning. When I woke, the first light of morning crept weakly through the barred window, gray and unforgiving. The cold from the cement bench clung to my back, stiffening every muscle. My belly shifted under my hand. The baby kicked as if reminding me I wasn't alone in this. The sound of metal doors slamming in the distance echoed in my chest. It was a reminder that freedom was now on the other side of walls I couldn't see past. My throat felt raw, as if I'd been crying even in my sleep. I sat up slowly, wincing, and tried to gather myself. My mind replayed the night before. My father's face set in stone, Marlene's smirk glistening in the rain. I told myself it had to be a nightmare, but the heavy clang of keys and the rattle of boots down the hall told me otherwise. Not long after, I saw him. My father. He stood a few feet from the cell, hands in his coat pockets, his gaze avoiding mine. I searched his face for even a flicker of softness, some sign he still saw me as his daughter. He finally spoke, his voice low but sharp. "You should have just admitted it." The words stabbed at me. My lips trembled as I forced them to move. "Because I didn't do it." My voice was barely a whisper, but I knew he heard me. He shifted, his jaw tightening, and without another word, he turned and walked away. The hollow sound of his shoes fading down the corridor felt like abandonment replayed in slow motion. I pressed my hands against the bars, willing him to look back, but he never did. Moments later, Marlene appeared, her perfume somehow managing to overpower the stale air. She leaned close, one hand casually resting on the bars as if she owned the place. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Better get used to this," she said softly, though every word carried poison. "No man wants a woman who can't even be trusted in her father's house." I swallowed hard, forcing myself not to flinch. Her smirk sliced through me, sharper than any blade. She stayed just long enough to watch my silence break into tears before stepping away, humming as though she had just finished a performance. I tried again to beg for a call. I turned to the guard, desperation heavy in my voice. "Please, just let me call my sister. She's all I have." The guard looked at me with sympathy, then down at a file on the desk. He sighed, shaking his head. "Your father left a note. Says no outside calls unless he approves." The air left my lungs like I'd been punched. My father had cut me off completely. Even my sister, my one lifeline, was out of reach because he willed it so. Hours dragged. The clock ticked loudly, each second pressing down on me. I wrapped my arms around my belly, whispering little reassurances to the baby, though I didn't believe them myself. That night, lying awake on the hard bench, I replayed everything in my mind. The missing $100, my father's sudden anger, Marlene's smug face. The pieces didn't fit, unless they were meant to. The thought chilled me. Could it have been a setup? The idea planted itself firmly in my chest. Marlene had always wanted me out of the way. What if this was her doing? Her fingerprints were all over the venom in my father's voice. The suspicion sparked something inside me, not enough to feel safe, but enough to remind me I still had a fight left. I pressed my hands to my belly and whispered into the darkness, "I'll find the truth." For both of us. The next day, a familiar voice broke through the silence, and with it came a truth I wasn't ready for. When the guard told me I had a visitor, my stomach knotted. My first thought was Marlene. I braced myself for her smirk, for her words dripping with poison. But when I was led to the visitation area, it wasn't her. Sitting on the other side of the glass was Joel, my younger cousin. His face carried the kind of cautious kindness I hadn't seen in what felt like years. I sank into the chair, my hands trembling slightly as I picked up the receiver. "Joel?" My voice cracked. "Hey, Ro," he said softly, glancing around like every word might be overheard. "I couldn't let you sit in here without knowing the truth." Before I could ask what he meant, I saw his hand slide something under the edge of the glass partition. A folded note. My breath caught. I opened it carefully, my heart pounding. It was my sister's handwriting. I knew it instantly. The words were short, rushed, but they lit something inside me that I thought had been extinguished. "I believe you. Don't give up. I'll find proof." For the first time in days, the tears that stung my eyes weren't from humiliation or fear. They were from relief. I pressed the note to my chest, closing my eyes for a moment, whispering, "Thank you." Joel's voice pulled me back. He leaned close to the glass, speaking just above a whisper. "Ro, it wasn't you. People saw Marlene hanging around your dad's wallet the day that money went missing. She's been bragging that you'll never set foot back in the house." The blood rushed in my ears. I'd suspected it, but hearing it said out loud, my suspicion hardened into certainty. "Why would she do this to me?" I asked, though deep down I already knew. Joel's gaze was steady. Because she wants you gone. She knows if your dad has to choose, he'll listen to her. I swallowed hard, my hand instinctively resting on my belly. For a moment, I let myself imagine Marlene's smug smile if I never made it back home. Before I could say more, Joel glanced over his shoulder nervously. I shouldn't stay long. If she finds out I came... He didn't get to finish. Because right then, through the narrow window of the hall, I saw her. Marlene. She was talking with one of the guards, her eyes narrowing when they landed on me. My pulse quickened. Joel gave me a sharp look and mouthed, "Act normal." I forced myself to smile weakly into the receiver, pretending nothing had been exchanged. "Thanks for stopping by, Joel," I said loudly enough for anyone nearby to hear. "You just told me to stay strong, right?" Marlene stepped closer, her heels clicking against the floor. Her gaze was ice. "Funny seeing you here," she said coolly, her lips curving into that same condescending smirk. I clutched the receiver tighter. "Joel was just checking in." "Nothing important." She didn't buy it. I could see it in the way her eyes narrowed, calculating. She gave Joel a glance sharp enough to cut glass before turning her attention back to me. "Stay strong," she echoed, her tone dripping with mockery. "You'll need it." She left without another word, but I knew that look. She was planning her next move. That night, back in the cell, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. The note from my sister was hidden carefully under my mattress. I pressed my hands to my swollen belly and whispered, "They think they've broken me, but we'll make it out. And when we do, they'll regret every second of this." I closed my eyes, trying to hold on to that flicker of resolve. The clang of a guard's boots pulled me back. He stopped at my cell, keys jangling. "Rowena," he called, his voice firm but not unkind. "Prepare for court tomorrow." My stomach tightened. Tomorrow could decide everything, and I wasn't sure if I was ready. Morning came too soon, the cold gray light of dawn seeping into the cell like it carried judgment of its own. I sat up slowly, my back aching, the weight of my unborn child pressing down with each breath. The guard's keys jingled in the corridor. "Rowena," he called, his tone clipped. "Time to go." They shackled my wrists, then my ankles, the metal biting into my skin. The sound of the cuffs snapping shut echoed louder than the rain outside. As they led me down the narrow hallway, my stomach churned. By the time I stepped into the courthouse, whispers rippled through the crowd. Familiar faces, neighbors, women from the church choir, even my old Sunday school teacher, stared at me, some in shock, others with that look of cruel satisfaction that only gossip feeds. I kept my eyes down, though the weight of their judgment pressed harder than the cuffs. My baby kicked against my ribs, as if reminding me that I wasn't fighting just for myself. The judge, a stern man with deep lines etched into his face, took his seat. "Bring her forward," he commanded. My knees nearly buckled as I was guided to the table. Then my father stood. My breath caught. He looked sharp in his suit, chin high, shoulders squared like a man convinced of his own righteousness. But his eyes never once met mine. "She took the money," he said flatly, his voice strong and steady. "My wife and I both saw her near my wallet. She's been irresponsible before. This time it went too far." Each word struck like a hammer against my chest. I whispered, "Dad?" But my voice was drowned beneath the scratching of the clerk's pen. He didn't flinch, didn't look at me, didn't soften. It was as though I wasn't his daughter anymore, just a problem to be disposed of. When I sat down, Marlene leaned slightly toward me from her place behind my father, her lips barely moving. "Better hope you don't go into labor in here," she hissed, her eyes glinting with cruel delight. "It's a cold floor." I clenched my jaw, refusing to give her the satisfaction of a reaction. But inside, rage boiled so hot it made my hands tremble against the wood of the table. The judge's gaze pinned me. "Ms. Rowena," he said sternly, "without evidence to contradict the testimony, these charges will proceed." Do you have anything to present? My mouth went dry. I wanted to scream the truth, to beg him to see the lies dripping from Marlene's smirk and the coldness in my father's eyes. But in the corner of the room, Joel caught my gaze. He gave the faintest shake of his head, his expression steady, urging patience. Not yet, his eyes seemed to say. I pressed a hand to my belly beneath the table. My child shifted, a reminder that I had to survive this, not just endure it. I swallowed back the tears that threatened to rise. The judge continued, unmoved. Court is adjourned until tomorrow morning. He struck his gavel, the sound sharp and final. The room buzzed as people stood, whispers filling the air like smoke. Joel slipped closer as the guards prepared to lead me out. His voice was low, just for me. Tomorrow, he whispered, slipping a folded scrap of paper into my palm. Proof. I gripped it tight, the thin paper warming quickly in my sweaty hand. I couldn't read it yet. Not here. But the weight of it was enough to keep me standing. As they led me back toward the holding area, I caught one last look at Marlene. She was smiling faintly, but her eyes darted toward Joel, suspicion flickering there. I knew she wouldn't stay idle. Back in the cell, I sat on the hard bench, the scrap of paper tucked carefully under my sleeve. My thoughts whirled between despair and the faintest glimmer of hope. Tomorrow could either free me or break me forever. I barely slept that night, knowing tomorrow could either free me or break me forever. My body ached from the cold bench, and every time I drifted into a shallow sleep, I woke with my hand clutching my belly, praying the baby was still safe. At dawn, the clang of the guard's boots against the concrete jolted me fully awake. He paused at my cell door, his face drawn tight. "Rowena," he said, his voice softer than usual. "Your bail request was denied. Your father refused to co-sign." For a moment, I just stared at him, the words not sinking in. Then my chest tightened so hard I thought I might stop breathing. My own father had decided to leave me here, knowing I was days, maybe hours, away from labor. The guard shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my eyes, and turned the key to check the locks. I whispered, mostly to myself, "So he really doesn't care if I give birth in here." The guard said nothing, but his silence was louder than any answer. Later that morning, the faint click of heels echoed down the corridor. A familiar perfume, sharp and cloying, filled the air before I even saw her. Marlene appeared at the bars like she owned the place. Perfectly put together, lips painted, not a hair out of place. She leaned in just enough for only me to hear. "This baby," she said smoothly, her voice dripping with venom, "will grow up knowing its mother was a thief. Maybe the child would be better off with us." My stomach turned. I wrapped both arms protectively over my belly, the heat of her words cutting deeper than the damp chill of the cell. I forced myself to meet her gaze. "You're lying," I whispered. Her smirk widened. "Am I? Look around you, sweetheart. Who's behind bars and who's walking free?" I could hear the guard shifting at the end of the hall. He was pretending not to listen, but his jaw was tight. Marlene straightened, flicked invisible lint from her sleeve, and turned away. Her heels clicked against the concrete until the sound disappeared. Hours dragged. The air felt heavier with every passing minute. I tried to focus on steady breaths, on staying calm for my baby. But then a sharp pain gripped my stomach. I gasped, clutching my belly as another wave followed, harder, sharper. I doubled over on the bench, the cuffs rattling as I tried to steady myself. The guard rushed in, his face pale. "She's in labor!" he called down the hall. My water broke right there on the cold cement floor, and tears blurred my vision. As they wheeled me out on a stretcher, panic swelled in my chest. I clung to the edge of consciousness. Then, through the chaos, Joel appeared in the hallway, his eyes wide but steady. He leaned close as the paramedics adjusted the straps. "I have proof," he whispered fiercely, his voice trembling with urgency. Hold on. Tomorrow, it all changes. His words cut through the haze of pain, a lifeline when I felt myself slipping away. I nodded faintly, gripping them like they were oxygen. The ride in the ambulance felt endless. The siren wailed above me, each bump in the road sending fresh waves of agony through my body. I thought of my baby, terrified I might not survive to meet her. For a terrifying moment, I felt the dark pull of surrender. Maybe it would be easier to let go. But then Joel's words echoed again in my mind. Proof. Tomorrow. Change. I tightened my grip on that fragile hope, refusing to let it slip. As the gurney burst through the hospital doors, the fluorescent lights blurred overhead. Nurses shouted orders, their voices sharp and urgent. "Pressure's dropping!" one of them yelled. I gasped, fighting to hold on. And as the doors of the maternity ward slammed shut behind us, the last thing I heard was the doctor shouting, "We're losing her pressure, sir." The last thing I saw before darkness closed in was a nurse leaning close, whispering, "Push, honey, push." Then everything blurred. When I woke, the first thing I heard was a cry. Small, piercing, and so heartbreakingly alive it cut through the fog in my head. My eyelids fluttered open, and a nurse stood beside me, smiling softly. In her arms, bundled in a pale blanket, was the tiniest little face I had ever seen. "Congratulations, Mama," she whispered, lowering the bundle into my arms. My chest ached with relief as I gazed down at my daughter. Her skin was pink, her fists clenched, and her cry softened as soon as she touched my chest. Tears slipped silently down my cheeks. "Anna," I breathed, the name I had whispered in secret when no one else would listen. "You're here." For a moment, everything else disappeared. The cell, the cold floors, the betrayal. It was just me and her. But when I looked to the empty chair beside my bed, the reality struck like a hammer. No father, no family, no one but the nurse hovering gently at my side. The silence was louder than the baby's cry. By mid-morning, the door creaked open. I braced myself, thinking maybe Joel had come back. Instead, the sharp scent of Marlene's perfume filled the room before she even spoke. She walked in, clutching a leather handbag and a stack of papers like she owned the place. Her heels clicked softly against the linoleum as she leaned toward the nurse's station. "If Rowena isn't fit to care for that child," she said, her voice smooth but loud enough for me to hear, "I'll take custody. This baby deserves stability." My blood ran cold. The nurse glanced at me, her brows furrowing, before replying calmly, "That's not a decision you get to make here, ma'am." Marlene's smile didn't falter. She turned her eyes to me, feigning sympathy. "Don't take it personally, dear. You've had some trouble. And this little one deserves better than growing up in chaos." I felt Anna shift against me, and I tightened my hold, pressing her closer to my chest. My voice trembled, but I forced myself to speak. "You're not taking her from me." Marlene tilted her head, lips curling. "We'll see." Before I could summon the strength to respond, the door opened again. Joel rushed in, slightly out of breath, carrying a worn folder tucked under his arm. Relief surged through me so hard it made my knees weak, even lying down. "Marlene," he said curtly, brushing past her, "I need to speak with the doctor." He moved quickly, pulling the physician aside and whispering urgently. I watched Marlene's expression shift from smug certainty to unease. Her perfectly painted face lost a shade of color as the doctor nodded, flipping through the documents Joel had shoved into his hands. Joel came to my side and, lowering his voice, slipped the folder onto my blanket. "From your sister," he murmured. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were bank statements, neatly printed, and a small audio recorder. My heart pounded as I skimmed the pages, withdrawals from my father's account, transfers that lined up with the days Marlene had hovered near his wallet. Then Joel pressed a button on the recorder. Marlene's voice filled the air, smug, careless. She'll never be allowed back once this sticks. That money was worth it. The words echoed in my ears, and I felt something inside me snap into place. The suspicion that had gnawed at me for days hardened into truth. My chest rose, steady now, my fear giving way to a fierce calm. I turned my head, meeting Marlene's wide eyes. Holding Anna close, I whispered, steady and certain, "You'll never take her from me, not after what you've done." For the first time, Marlene had no quick retort. She stood there, lips parted, before spinning on her heel and storming out. The nurse leaned close once the door shut, her hand brushing my arm. "You need to be ready," she murmured softly, almost like a warning. "She's not finished yet." I glanced down at Anna, her tiny hand gripping my finger with surprising strength. My resolve deepened. I stared down at my daughter, knowing the next battle would decide both our futures. The next morning, I stood outside the courthouse doors, my body still aching from labor, a photo of Anna tucked into my palm like a shield. The chill of the marble steps seeped through my shoes as I climbed them slowly, each step heavier than the last. When I walked into the courtroom, a hush fell over the gallery. I heard the whispers ripple through the crowd. She gave birth in jail? Poor thing. 9 months along, and her own family did this? The humiliation burned, but I forced my chin up. I wasn't here to crumble. I was here to fight. The bailiff guided me to my seat, and I caught sight of Joel sitting quietly in the back row, a steady presence that gave me strength. Marlene sat front and center, her posture flawless, her face a mask of serene confidence. My father avoided my eyes, hands folded stiffly in his lap. When the judge entered, the gavel struck, echoing like a drumbeat through my chest. The prosecution called Marlene to the stand. She walked up with the elegance of a woman headed to a gala, not a courtroom. She placed her hand on the Bible, swore in, and began her performance. "Rowena has always been unstable," she said smoothly, glancing at me with a faint smile. "My husband and I only wanted to protect the baby. She's under stress, making poor choices. It wasn't safe for her to raise a child in such circumstances." My stomach twisted. She wasn't just painting me as guilty. She was painting me as unfit to be a mother. My father was next. He stood slowly, his face as hard as stone. His voice carried, cold and clear. "I saw her near my wallet. My wife did too. We couldn't ignore what we knew." Every word sliced at me. He wouldn't even look at me. I felt the heat of tears pressing behind my eyes, but refused to let them fall. As he sat back down, Marlene leaned forward, close enough that only I could hear her whisper, "Better hope you don't go into labor in there again. It's a cold floor, you know." I clenched the photo of Anna so tightly I thought the edges might tear. Then Joel stood. Calm, deliberate, he handed a folder to the bailiff, who carried it to the judge. "Your Honor," Joel said, his voice steady, "this is evidence we've obtained. Bank transfers and a recorded voicemail." The judge adjusted his glasses, flipping through the documents. Then he pressed play on the small recorder. Marlene's voice filled the room. Smug, venomous. "If she's out of the way, we can finally raise this child right." Gasps erupted from the gallery. I saw neighbors clutching their mouths, church members shaking their heads, whispers darting back and forth like wildfire. The judge's gaze hardened as he turned to my father. "Did you know about this?" My father's lips parted, but no words came. He faltered, his eyes darting toward Marlene, who gripped his arm tightly, her nails pressing into his sleeve. For the first time, I saw something crack in his expression. Doubt. Fear. Slowly, I rose to my feet, holding the photo of Anna so everyone could see. My knees wobbled, but my voice, though shaky, carried through the silence. "You sent me to jail for something I didn't do. You tried to take my child from me, but truth doesn't stay buried forever." The room filled with murmurs, voices of support rising from the gallery. "She's right. This isn't justice. How could they? The judge slammed the gavel, demanding order. We will reconvene tomorrow with a ruling. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. The tension in the room was unbearable, the outcome hanging in the balance. As I sat back down, Joel brushed past me, slipping a quiet word into my ear. Hold strong. Tomorrow is yours. That night, my father came to my hospital room alone, and for the first time, he couldn't find the words to defend himself. The morning sunlight filtered softly through the blinds, painting the sterile white walls of my hospital room with a pale gold glow. Anna stirred quietly in her bassinet beside me, her tiny fists twitching as though she was fighting invisible battles in her dreams. I reached over and brushed a fingertip across her cheek, promising myself again that she would never have to fight the ones I'd been forced to. A knock on the door broke the silence. When it opened, I saw him. My father. His shoulders were slumped, his face drawn and gray, like the weight of the world had finally pressed down hard enough to break him. He stepped inside slowly, his eyes fixed not on me, but on the small bundle sleeping at my side. For a long moment, he didn't speak. He just stood there, staring at Anna, his lips trembling. Finally, in a voice rougher than I'd ever heard, he said, I didn't know. I thought I was doing the right thing. I felt the words pierce me, but I didn't flinch. I sat up straighter, cradling Anna closer. No, I said firmly, my voice calm but cutting. You didn't think. You chose her words over mine. You chose to believe a lie instead of your own daughter. His eyes filled with tears, glistening but never falling. He opened his mouth once more, but nothing came. Just silence. The same silence that had condemned me in that courtroom, that had kept me in that cell. And now, for the first time, it wasn't mine. It was his. We stayed like that for what felt like forever. Me holding the one person who would never question my worth. Him drowning in a silence he couldn't escape. The door opened again, breaking the tension. Joel stepped in, holding a folder and wearing an expression I couldn't quite read until I saw the relief in his eyes. Rowena, he said softly, it's over. I blinked. Over? He nodded, stepping closer. The judge dismissed the charges. You have full custody of Anna. And Marlene? She's under investigation for fraud and obstruction. They found the transfers. They know. My chest tightened. Not from fear this time, but from release. The chains I had carried for months, maybe years, seemed to fall away in an instant. I looked down at Anna, asleep and peaceful, and whispered, We're free. My father stepped forward, his hand hovering above the bassinet like he wanted to touch her. For a second, my heart twisted, but then Anna whimpered, shifting in her sleep, and I placed my hand firmly between his and my child. Not today, I said quietly. Maybe not ever. His lips quivered. A single tear escaped and traced down his cheek. He nodded slowly, his chin dipping as though he had finally run out of excuses. Without a word, he turned and left the room, his figure shrinking as the door closed behind him. For the first time, he was truly silent. Joel sat beside me, placing a steady hand on my shoulder. You did it, Rowena. You fought for her. And for yourself. I swallowed hard, emotions rushing through me. I almost didn't make it. But you did, he said, his voice firm. And that's what matters now. I looked down at Anna again, noticing the tiny knit hat perched on her head. The same one I had worked on in the dim light of that jail cell, each stitch a prayer I thought would never be answered. Seeing it now, on her small head, it felt like a symbol, not of the place I'd come from, but of the survival that had carried me here. I kissed her forehead softly, tears finally spilling free, not of pain, but of something deeper. We'll be okay, I whispered. because silence can hurt, but it can also set you free. Joel leaned back, letting me have the moment. Outside, the world was still waiting, the hearings, the whispers, the stares. But inside this room, it was just me and Anna. And that was enough.